and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and it really helps the show reach more people. I have just a few days until Jasmine would be turning 6. She would be 6 on March 11th. I have found that this time of year leading up to her birthday is so hard. Sometimes it starts at Christmas and leads all the way up until her birthday. Other times it starts in January or February. Sometimes the days leading up are harder than the actual day itself. And it's really strange how the grief can change from year to year. Sometimes you don't even know how the day is going to go. You wake up crying and are sad all day. Sometimes you're sad, but the crying doesn't come until later. Last year, it didn't come until at night when we were singing happy birthday to her. I think that's one thing that we need to understand. Grief won't look the same for us every year. It's not always predictable. We have to learn how to just go with it and lean into it. It never really gets easier. It just gets different. So today's business spotlight is from Ashley about her nonprofit called Houston's Liftoff. Here is what she had to say. My name is Ashley Hall. I am the founder of a 501c3 nonprofit called Houston's Liftoff. We have been established since April of 2020. Our location is in Canton, Ohio. We serve families with a sick baby in the neonatal intensive care unit. We have a partnership with Akron Children's NICU located in Canton, Ohio. It is in memory of my son, Houston Autry. I delivered my son when I was 25 weeks pregnant. There was a shortage in the umbilical cord. Houston wasn't getting the proper blood flow or oxygen he needed. It caused him to be an emergency C-section. He was born 1 pound, 3 ounces. He was born August 14th, 2015, and he lived 4.5 months in the NICU. Houston overcame so many infections, surgeries, and illnesses. His ultimate diagnosis was pulmonary hypertension. Pulmonary hypertension is when your heart and lungs must work harder. And unfortunately, he passed away on January 5th, 2016. His lungs were so sick from being born premature, his little body couldn't fight anymore. Every birthday and anniversary, I would donate to the NICU in memory of Houston. One day, I reached out to social media to see if anyone wanted to help with donations. We received an outpour of support, which led us to where we are today. Houston's Liftoff provides counseling services, hygiene items, gas gift cards, baby books, baby blankets, catered meals, and equipment for the NICU, crafts to make memories with their baby, and so much more. We've offered care baskets to a mother who has lost a child as well. This usually includes a candle, a stuffed animal, snacks, jewelry, etc. We have served over 769 NICU families and staff. Our ending goal is to provide housing similar to the Ronald McDonald House. The Ronald House is another great nonprofit that provides a place to sleep at night while being close to the hospital. This makes it easier on families who are transporting back and forth from the hospital. Our mission is to serve the NICU community while supporting pregnancy and infant loss. Since I am a statistic of both, I think it's important to raise awareness for both. 1 in 10 babies are born too soon. 1 in 4 mothers will have experienced pregnancy and infant loss. We also partner with nonprofits around the world who focus their efforts into just pregnancy and infant loss. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing about your amazing nonprofit with us. So today I'm talking with Sarah Jane from Embodied Possibility. She went through multiple pregnancy losses, unexplained infertility, and a chronic illness that ultimately led to a hysterectomy. She is childless, not by choice. Sarah Jane talks about her journey and how it is important to have self-compassion for ourselves throughout the difficult times. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Sarah Jane from Embodied Possibility. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm Sarah Jane. I live on the unceded territory of the Hulkaminam and the Senchothan speaking people. It's also a place known as Salt Spring Island, British Columbia, off the west coast of Canada. I am a longtime yoga teacher, studio owner, and coach. And have the pleasure of working out of my home. So that I'm super grateful for that. A little bit about my infertility story and why we're here having this conversation today is I had multiple pregnancy losses, long period of unexplained infertility, and then a chronic illness that led to me having a hysterectomy, which has resulted in me being childless, not by choice.
I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through as much as you did. It's something, I would obviously never wish anybody ever had to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So, what during your infertility and your loss journey, did you find yourself having a lot of support from family and friends?
It was kind of mixed, that a lot of people were like, oh, yeah, we understand. And I'm sure that they did and do, but nobody really knew what to do or say, So they were there. There was support, but it often wasn't very tangible. And because I find that anything to do with grief or loss, folks aren't necessarily really equipped on how to have those hard conversations. And it's something that we don't really want to face. So then that results in the conversations and the support being a little less than I would have hoped for.
Were you open about what you were going through, or did you keep it more private?
I kept it quite private to just a small group of my immediate family and a small group of friends. I didn't tell everybody by any means. And a lot of my sort of extended friend circle had young children at the time. And so I felt there was already a little bit of a divide, like I was trying to get and maintain a pregnancy and they already have had children. And so that there wasn't a lot, didn't feel like there was a lot of space to discuss that, and not through any fault of theirs. But when you have young children, there's just not a lot of space, you know? And it can be challenging to find the time to have those conversations with people who have young children because they're often with the children. And so you can't really have those kind of conversations, I found anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. It is kind of an all-consuming thing.
For sure. Yeah.
Did you find though then that it changed your relationship with some of those people in your life?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah. And the longer I went down my infertility journey and then to the point of being childless, not by choice, um, there is a there was created a division with some folks that I won't ever be a mother. And so there's just sort of a parting of ways, like going down a different path. Some of my close friends, my dearest friends, do have children, and we have managed to stay connected. But I do find myself having more and more friendships with other women who are childless.
So I know, sometimes when people are having trouble, conceiving that, you'll often hear like, maybe you should adopt or things like that. Did you hear those types of things very often?
Oh, for sure. It would be like, everything from like, oh, you should eat more kale smoothies to, yeah, why don't you just adopt? Or like, oh, you could have one of mine, all things like that, which I believe that people's hearts are in the right place, but it's very misguided thing to say to people experiencing infertility and especially childlessness. Um, Yeah.
So you said you had a diagnosis of unexplained infertility. Was
Mhm.
that frustrating to you to not have an answer?
Oh, absolutely. When something's unexplained, you can't really, there's no clear path forwards. Then they're sort of like, well, we don't know why, just keep trying. And sort of like that was just sort of like the endless advice. So it was over many years. It was sort of over 8 years of just like trying and trying and trying and nothing and nothing and nothing. And it was extremely wearing, on myself, on my emotions, on my relationship with my husband, and just the constant feeling of failing, every month when it was clear that I wasn't pregnant.
What were some things you found that helped you get through the grief?
Hmm. I I think a part of it was just holding on to that it may happen, and this idea and this sort of, I don't know where I got this idea from, maybe just from sort of like dominant narrative that one day it will happen. And so, but it didn't. So I kind of pushed the grief and everything aside for a really long time and I didn't even feel that I had permission to fully grieve. Like it wasn't grief. I had somehow had this understanding, which again, I think is misguided, that you can't lose something and grieve something that you never had. But I know that that is not true anymore. So I don't know that I fully allowed myself to grieve until it would the possibility of having children was truly over. That's when it fully started for me.
Was there a certain point that you felt like, okay, my journey is over? Like, this is the moment, that I know like it's not going to happen for me or that I am choosing to stop?
Yeah, well, when it was recommended that I have a hysterectomy because I had chronic fibroids, I'd had them removed uh, before, and it was recommended that I have them removed again. And then when there was the investigation, sort of leading up to having them removed, they were like, actually, it's there's one very, very large fibroid, and they're like, we don't think we can take this out without sort of taking the uterus and everything along with it. So when I consented to that, that was the point, like, okay, this is it. This is the line in the sand. I mean, there had been many times in those 8 years that I felt like, oh, well, we should just stop trying. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But there was still that little like um holding on, that the what if. And I found that very, very challenging. Like, and that if I stopped hoping, then it meant that I didn't really want it to begin with. I had that, I sort of, again, a belief that I don't know where it came from, and I know now it's not true. But the finality of the surgery and the hysterectomy really allowed me to finally uh, sort of take a step forward and allow the grief to be there, and in time allow myself to imagine and live a life without the children that I wanted.
It is really hard walking that line of, not giving up hope, but then, not holding on to it so much that you can't move forward. It's kind of that fine
Mm-hmm.
line that sometimes it's hard to know like which side to kind of fall on.
Totally, absolutely. It's excruciating.
It really is.
Yeah.
So when you were going through everything, did you have any idea that, starting out that this would be something you would be facing? Like, did you ever think that infertility would be something that would happen to you?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there's so much focus in the like sexual education of women and girls around not getting pregnant, right? There's this huge focus on that it was always like, oh, like don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, don't get pregnant, until I wanted to get pregnant, then it wasn't happening, and I felt kind of blindsided by it. Like I didn't know what the statistics were and how many people struggle with infertility. And I knew that pregnancy loss happened to people frequently, but I don't think I really knew how frequently. So no, I don't think I was really prepared.
Miscarriage is something you hear about, like other people have it, like, but you don't really realize it can really happen to anybody, or, how many people around you that you don't even know have had one until you go through it. And then everyone's like, oh, I've had one too. And you're like, I never knew.
Right. And for my healthcare providers, they were like, oh, well, it's really common. So, no worries. Just keep going. And it's like, and I felt that really minimized the effects of it and what it means to have a pregnancy loss. That's also something that contributed, I think, to my feeling of not allowing myself to grieve that. Like, oh, well, it happens to so many people. Like, I'm not special. I'm doing special in air quotes. And so you just kind of need to get on with it and, put it behind you and try again, kind of thing. But it is a huge loss, and it needs to be acknowledged. And back to an earlier question where you said, did I feel like I had support? I didn't feel like I had the support to acknowledge and grieve the true loss that it is.
So kind of going off of that, in general, do you feel like your medical team or doctors provided you good care during that time?
I mean, good physical care, yes. Emotional care, not so much. And I know that's not their speciality. They're not mental health professionals, but I wasn't referred to anybody to speak to, and it wasn't suggested that I might want to speak with somebody about it who that was their area of specialty, mental and emotional care. So yes, and they could have pointed me more in a direction to get the specific mental and emotional help.
I do feel like a lot of doctors are kind of lacking in that particular area. And I'm like, you don't have to be an expert in it, but you can at least offer some encouraging words or, something instead of being dismissive.
For sure. Or, a pamphlet with some names and phone numbers of somebody that it is their area of expertise, just something would be helpful.
Yeah, something is always better than nothing, right? You don't have
Yes.
to try that hard to be better than nothing.
Yeah.
That's my opinion, anyways.
It's a good opinion.
Yeah. So why do you think that it's important to talk about your experience?
To offer some kind of pathway, bringing these subjects sort of out of the shadows and out of isolation and out of the idea that, oh, well, it's common, just sort of get on with it. And it happens to lots of people, but you just have to keep going. I found that was a very disempowering place personally to be, and feeling isolated. And there's so many things are intertwined with pregnancy loss and infertility and childlessness that affect your life as a whole, but they're not often talked about. And I know why. It comes with a lot of guilt and shame, because we live in a society that is pro-natalist, and sort of parenthood and motherhood is the highest peak that you could ever reach as a woman. And that it's sort of the idea too that should be your main aim that you're reaching for. And if you don't want to meet that aim, or you're unable to meet that aim, then what? And so there's not a lot of talk around the then what, that there are women leading purposeful, meaningful, society changing lives without children.
Yeah, that is true that, society seems to think there's kind of this one narrative, like you grow up, you get married, you have kids, and you have this perfect little family, and, that's that. And that's not everybody's story. That's not even what everybody wants.
Exactly. Yeah. So to sort of put myself out there as somebody who isn't living that narrative, and just sort of, if I help one person feel that, okay, there are other options, or sort of that it leads to some kind of moving forward or self-acceptance, then that's why I do it.
I know one thing you said is that you think that self-compassion can really help us through our grief, and, accept that our life can still be meaningful. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Self-compassion is something that I believe in deeply, and I practice a lot. And it sounds simple, just be kind to yourself. But when you start to listen to your inner narrative, when I really started to deeply listen to my inner narrative, I found it quite difficult to be that kind to myself, to be that accepting of myself. Um, because of all these sort of voices that are, internalized beliefs from either family or society at large, or that I wasn't good enough, and that I was a failure, and that my body did let me down. So there was a lot of unpacking of all of those things, and sort of re-examining my beliefs and what I hope for in life, and how I'm going to live my life. And that all came from practicing self-compassion. There's also this sort of this idea that's out there that self-compassion means that everything is okay, like that everything all the time is okay, and you're just kind of like a doormat, that you're just like don't have any boundaries, and you don't and then it makes you kind of soft and weak. So I also had to kind of dismantle that within myself as well, because I was used to motivating myself with criticism, like trying to be better and do things differently because I hadn't done them so well in the past. And so rewiring that thought pattern of I can motivate myself with kindness to do something differently, to explore, to take a step forwards. And then the integration of grief part was to truly acknowledge that what I was feeling and what I do feel is grief, and it's okay. I'm allowed to feel these feelings, and to let the parts of myself that feel those feelings truly feel them. Self-compassion is about meeting the parts of ourselves that are in pain and offering kindness to those parts. And I realized that all along the way, because it was painful, because I was keeping up this idea of hope and it'll just happen, it'll happen, it'll happen, I wasn't allowing myself to meet the parts of myself that were in pain. And so when I started a focused self-compassion practice, it allowed me a space to actively grieve, but that was a container. It was boundaried. I wasn't just sort of like in it and not able to get out of it, which I think is another reason why I pushed the grief aside for so long, because I was scared that if I let myself go there, then I wouldn't come back from it. But with this active self-compassion practice, it has boundaries on it. It has a time limit. And so I can touch in on those feelings, see where I'm at, and then have an active way to move out of it.
What are some ways that people can, kind of start to practice self-compassion?
Hmm. Well, the first self-compassion, the first part is mindfulness. So just noticing the inner narrative. Notice when you make a mistake, or you feel like you've haven't done something as best you could. What is your immediate thought? Is it a kind thought towards yourself, or is it like, oh, you did it wrong again, or like, oh, you're so stupid, or you should have done that differently, just to notice what the inner narrative is. And then once you've noticed that, see if you can flip the script. Can you offer yourself words of kindness? And that part can be really challenging, especially if we're not used to receiving kindness. It can feel very confronting, and it can feel like I don't want to accept that, or I can't accept that, or like a rejection of that kindness.
I feel like that's kind of like why some of us have such a hard time like taking a compliment. Just
Totally.
like,
Yeah,
okay, I'm uncomfortable with this. Like, I'm not used to this. Like, don't compliment me.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's that same feeling.
So is that what you do now with your embodied possibility?
It's a really big part of it. Self-compassion is a tool for so many areas of um, integrating your experience. So you can work with it through grief, through building confidence, and sort of embodying who you want to be and where you want to go now with life. So yeah, it's definitely a tool that I use.
Do you have any advice for people who are going through either infertility or loss, or those who are facing the childless not by choice?
Mm-hmm. Make space for yourself and your grief, because if you don't, nobody else will. Find people who know what you're going through, whether that be peers or professionals, counselors, therapists, or coaches. And then be curious about what possibilities are out there. This is my top 3 pieces of advice.
When when you were going through like infertility and loss, I know we've already talked about support, but did you at the time like go to any support groups or anything like that, or did you know of any even that were around you?
Yeah, I didn't know of any, which is probably why I didn't go. And I don't know why I didn't think about the internet and, different groups online. Now with the childless community, I've found so many um, support groups and resources online, and it's incredible finding people who understand, as I said earlier, whether it be peers or professionals, is a huge light in the dark. For myself, I felt really isolated, like I was sort of like the only one struggling with the things that I was struggling with, and I had nobody to show me, like I couldn't see other people living a life that I was, on my way to living, which is being childless. And so since having the hysterectomy in 2018, I went online. At first I joined, free Facebook groups, and then there's paid online communities for childless people, and it's just opened up a whole new world.
It's hard when we're going through something and it feels like we're, like you said, the only one going through that experience. And it is
Mm-hmm.
really nice to have others that are going through similar things and know, exactly how we're feeling. So we don't feel so like I'm the only one who feels this way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And going online can be, um, for me, it felt really safe because I was in the comfort of my own home, and it felt less vulnerable, in some of these groups. You can be sort of like as anonymous as you choose to be, or you can read other people's experiences and get pointed to resources without doing a lot of self-disclosure, so it felt really comfortable and safe. And then as I integrated my grief more and sort of found my footing and really started to identify as a childless woman, then I started to put myself out there a bit more. And in 2020, I started Embodied Possibility, which is, so now I'm working with women in one-on-one coaching and group coaching programs to help them integrate their grief, amplify confidence, and find what's next for them on the path.
I love that you're doing that you're helping other people get through that too. I think it's so special when, you can find someone who's been through it, who's there to help other people go through it.
It's a game changer for sure.
And then do you do most of yours online, or is it in person?
Yes, it's online.
Yeah, I guess especially with COVID hitting and all of that fun stuff, that kind of put a dent in everything.
Yeah. And I think this kind of connection works really well online because people can be in their own homes. They can be in a safe, comfortable place already. The idea of walking into a room and everybody seeing you and you having to sit there with everybody in this space is just too overwhelming for a lot of people when they're already overwhelmed by grief and their life circumstances. So this allows people to have that place of safety and connect at the same time. So I feel like the online setting is the perfect setting.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think technology is really great for stuff like that,
For sure.
It's come a long way.
Absolutely. In a short period of time.
Yes, it has. I feel like it's changing like every day.
Yeah. Yes.
So I know that, grief is not something that ever completely goes away, but I know it can change over time. Do you feel like, you still carry a lot of that, or do you feel like you've been able to work through a lot of it, or?
Yeah, I like to use the word integrate because it's not something that we get over and just sort of like, oh, that was in the past and now this is different. We are a collection of our experiences, and I bring my experiences with me. And the grief of childlessness is always with me because it's a lifelong grief. There's so many things that I don't get to do. I don't get to go to my child's graduation. I don't get to teach them how to swim. I don't get to see them find a partner. I don't get to see them go off to college. So there's all these things, these milestone events that my friends with children and loads of folks that I don't know with children having and doing on a daily basis. And it's all around, you see it everywhere. I live in a town with lots of people who have kids, and we know when it's school graduation, we know when all at the lake with families teaching their kids how to swim. So these things are sort of in my life all the time. And the acute grief that I feel has definitely leveled out. But some days something will hit me, and something that always hits me is back to school. And so you start to hear about it, around now, and we're recording this in July. Back to school is in September, so it's 6 weeks away. But I saw something the other day about it. So, and then as you get closer, and then all the pictures on social media, different things like that. So it's waves, but I feel like I have enough of a relationship with grief that I let it come. I have tools to work with it. I have my self-compassion practice to be able to meet it when it comes and not let it overwhelm. So it's never going to fully go away. And I can be prepared for times when it comes. I've identified over the years, family holidays, and Christmas is often a time for me that it feels particularly hard. But I know that now, and so I can prepare for it.
Yeah, I think that's helpful, being able to identify the times that you know are going to hit you hard so that you can be ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have times that still hit you unexpectedly?
Yeah, sure. Just recently, earlier this year, I joined a community choir, and it was a women's choir. And I went, and there was a number of women who were pregnant, a number of women who had, babies that looked like they were under 6 months old, and part of the choir group. And I didn't think about it beforehand that might be the case. And that caught me off guard for sure. And so the first time I was like, oh, whoa, I didn't expect this, And I see people with babies all the time, and I see pregnant women all the time, and it doesn't always hit me that way, but it was something to do with that particular scenario, or that configuration of people. I don't know. Or maybe that I was a bit unprepared. I didn't think about it ahead of time. And so that caught me off guard. And I did struggle through that first practice. And I did think, do I want to go back? Is this okay? Am I going to be okay with this? And I did decide, okay, I'll go a second time and see how it goes. And it was fine the second time. And so then I was like, okay, I can do this. But really giving myself the space, I allowed myself to decide that if the second time it didn't feel great, that I wasn't going to go back. And it wasn't that I was angry, or that I feel like something different should have happened, or that I was overwhelmed with, a sense of like, oh, I should push through, or it's like, this isn't the right time. This isn't the right space for this. So I gave myself a lot of leeway.
I think that's super important, that we aren't pushing ourselves to do things just because we feel we need to, or, for whatever reason, that we give ourselves that space to say, hey, like, I can't do this right now, maybe at another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So do you think that self-compassion and self-care kind of go hand in hand, or do you think that they're two kind of separate things?
I think self-compassion is the foundation of self-care. So you have to be able to commit to self-care. I think you have to start from a place of self-compassion, like giving yourself the space and the grace and the time that you need to identify and then put into place actions of self-care. Does that make sense?
Yes, no, it does. I do think, they kind of, that self-compassion is, self-care, and that it's something that you do for yourself. And both of those things are things that a lot of us are not very good at.
No, it's true. Yeah. And I think there's a big difference between self-care and self-soothing. They both they're very important things, but they are different. Self-care is something that you do on a regular basis to take care of yourself. So that whether that be, making sure that you are moving in a way that works for your body and your schedule, or having a counselor if that's something that you're into, or being connected with peers who have experienced what you've experienced, like those, and the self-care that happens on a regular basis. So it's forming a foundation so that when a grief wave does hit you, you have this foundation of things to that support you. And then self-soothing is a thing that you would do in the moment. Like you might watch your favorite TV show, or you might take a bath, or whatever it is. But I think in the sort of dominant narrative, self-care and self-soothing get kind of put together. And people often think like self-care is taking a bath, but a bath is not going to help you with your deep grief.
Yeah, it's going to be more of a temporary thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
no, that makes a lot of sense. And I do think you're right. I mean, especially as women, a lot of women are not good at the self-care. And then it becomes taking a shower by yourself is like
Right.
self-care. And I'm like, but that's not enough,
No, no way. No, that is like self-soothing in the moment for those 5 minutes might take the acute edge off, but that's not going to help form a foundation of self-care.
I think that's a good way to look at it, is building that foundation versus, doing something temporarily in the moment to make yourself feel better.
Yeah. And it's not that anyone's doing it wrong. It's just we don't have the tools or the understanding yet. And then when we do, then we do what we can to fix it.
Always a work in progress, right?
Absolutely.
So is there anything else that you'd like to share or add?
I mean, apart from finding your people, finding your peers, and giving yourself the space to whatever you're working with, that will be what it will allow you to integrate the grief and to be able to sort of move forwards with it and then see what's possible.
So if people wanted to find out more information about you, where would they go for that?
My website is embodiedpossibility.com, and I write a weekly article there, and I have a ton of free resources. I have a free self-compassion course for women who are childless not by choice. So finding all those things on the website would be the most direct way. I'm also on Instagram at Embodied Possibility.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story and a little bit about what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sarah Jane, for sharing your story with us. I wanted to expand on what we talked about with the childless people not, quote, fitting in our traditional society. You are right that society views motherhood as the ultimate goal that every woman should be striving for. And for many, it isn't what they want, and for many, it isn't attainable, even though it is what they want. Then these people are left feeling like they don't have a place or they don't fit in. We all have different goals and a different journey. As always, we need to support and love people no matter what their goals are and no matter where their journey may take them. People can still have a fulfilled life without children, so we shouldn't judge them for not having them or not being able to have them. They already have enough pressure they put on themselves, and enough pressure from others in society to fit into that perfect mold. We can be that person to support them, and the person that they can open up to. We can help them feel heard and understood. The world can be cruel enough as it is, so let's always be kind. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please consider leaving a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more people. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.